Emergency service is dangerous business. When the call comes in, there's an urgency to respond. That's what we're trained for, to get where the help is needed, to do the job, to make the difference. As the lights flash and the sirens blare, the adrenaline pumps, and even longtime veterans feel their pulse race as they make their run to the rescue. It's what the community relies on. We are, after all, the men and women committed to help others escape tragedy. And there's the irony, because too often, in the haste and urgency and quest to save lives, emergency responders are themselves involved in crashes that keep them from those calling for help. It's time to develop a different culture to responding, one focused on arriving safely to provide the needed service, and in the process, doing no harm. Responding to the call is dangerous business, and nowhere is that danger more evident than at intersections. It's estimated that emergency service vehicles are involved in more than 3,000 intersection collisions every year, resulting in millions of dollars in property losses, injuries, and death. And every one of the deaths, every one of the crashes, every one of those injuries tumbles a whole series of consequences that take their toll on the lives of the responders, our organizations, and the people we're intending to serve. In nearly every city and community in the country, there are stories of people confronting the loss and pain that intersection crashes cause. One of these stories involves Todd Galden, Fire Chief of Stokesdale Fire Department in Stokesdale, North Carolina. It involves his personnel responding to a routine fire alarm.
We had just finished a Christmas lunch here at the fire station. I had career staff and volunteer staff on hand. We received a fire alarm to a business within our district. We left with our first two engines out, and I was behind those two engines. They were a distance in front of me. As we approached the intersection, they were still a distance in front of me. They were running emergency traffic. I was running non-emergency traffic. I had taken my eyes off of them for just a second to look at some traffic that was approaching from my right. When I looked back to the intersection, I saw a silver streak, at which time I saw the rear end of the fire truck go up in the air and dust fly. At that point, I knew that there had been an accident, but I just didn't know how bad it was.
The victim was in a fuel tanker entering the intersection at the same time the fire truck approached, responding to an emergency call for service. A commercial vehicle was positioned to the right of the responding fire truck and created a sightline obstruction between the vehicles. As they both entered the intersection, the fire truck impacted with the tanker's truck trailer, causing it to overturn and slide through an adjacent car sales lot on the corner.
Our engine was sitting in the middle of the intersection. We had a tanker truck overturned on its side. And at that point, my initial thought was about everybody's health and safety. And it was, God, if you'll just let everybody be okay, we'll take care of the rest of it. We can manage the rest of it. After the accident had occurred, it was brought to our attention by the State Highway Patrol that the entire incident had been captured on surveillance video by one of the surveillance cameras located at the gas station on the southwest corner of the intersection. When I saw the video for the first time, it became very obvious that our vehicle did not stop for the red light, which was disappointing.
There are lots of explanations for why intersection collisions are so prevalent, but no explanation has ever reversed a crash, healed an injury, or brought a loved one back to life.
When I review that video, it's still hard to watch because you know what's going to happen. That will never go away on that video. You know that fire truck and that tanker are going to hit over and over.
What we need is a new mindset to kick into gear whenever we approach intersections in emergency vehicles, a keener awareness of what can go wrong. That's what Operation Safe Arrival is all about. We've got to see arriving safely as our #1 priority. Even national standards agree that no other consideration has precedence over getting to the call safely. Too often, collisions at intersections keep us from rendering the help we're committed to. So our intention is to change the way we look at intersections, change the way we think about intersections, and change the culture to reestablish arriving safely as the #1 priority. Operation Safe Arrival is based on a very simple premise. If we change nothing, then nothing will change.
I believe the collisions at intersections are on an increase for emergency vehicles. Our calls are increasing, the number of responses that we have, the traffic flow that we have through our communities is really increased, congestion, and it's just that risk is getting higher and higher. There is a lot more potential risk for accidents.
When intersection crashes occur, the injuries and loss of life inevitably lead to the outcry, "Who was at fault?" And the legal system sets itself upon the task of determining who's responsible. But let's make a point, make it now, and make it clear. If you're driving an emergency vehicle involved in an intersection crash and someone dies, that individual is going to be dead whether it's your fault or the other driver's fault. And that's nothing any of us wants to be a part of. The truth is, there's nothing we can do to guarantee the proper behavior of other drivers. But if we apply ourselves to a few important principles, if we commit ourselves to doing no harm, there is at least the possibility that intersection crashes might be reduced. One important key involves doing our best to make sure that the drivers of other vehicles recognize the path and intention of the emergency vehicles we operate. We call this the perception of presence. Okay, let's take a closer look at the perception of presence idea. There are at least 4 major factors to be considered: warning devices, other drivers' actions, safer intersection practices, and the laws of physics. We begin our examination of the perception of presence with a review of warning devices. Now, everyone accepts that responding to a true emergency requires the use of all audible and visual warning devices. That's a given. But you have to accept this as well. No flashing light, no wailing siren, no blaring horn has ever stopped another vehicle.
People are either going to yield to your cross-traffic presence or they're not. And if you try to force yourself through that, you're simply asking for a collision at that point. All of the training that I've ever taken really encourages a driver to make eye contact with the civilian motorist. That's the only way you really know that they have seen you. And it's at that point whether or not you're going to be able to judge if in fact they are going to yield. And those extra few seconds to allow that motorist who is not yielding to pass is in fact that margin of safety that we need in order to make sure that we arrive to perform our mission.
There's always the possibility that other drivers may not be able to spot where the emergency vehicle is coming from. There can be drivers who are hearing impaired, or distracted by mobile phones or loud music, or driving cars that are heavily soundproofed. Keep this in mind. Warning devices don't prevent crashes. Reactions to warning devices prevent collisions. The concept of the perception of presence recognizes that nothing we do can give us control or ownership of intersections, but we can heighten our awareness of how other drivers are reacting to our warnings and make the attempt to respond safely. Think of it this way. Your lights and sirens are only a request for the right of way. As much as we might prefer it otherwise, lights and sirens don't ensure the right of way.
You think what someone's going to do. And that's not always the case. We can never assume what they're going to do. And I've put myself in that situation before. I've been on apparatus where drivers put themselves in the situation before, where you think that you know what someone's going to do. We really don't know until they stop and they see you.
Technology has also developed to identify approaching emergency vehicles and provide them priority access to intersections. These can assist in emergency response on busy, congested roadways by changing all traffic signals to red while keeping one direction green for the approaching apparatus. These systems are tools to provide access and do not ensure the right of way for responding vehicles.
Today with the preemption, it's something new that's been in our community the last couple of years. We've been really stressing the fact that that does not give us the right of way to go through an intersection without giving that proper due regard.
Now, we all understand that motor vehicle laws typically allow emergency vehicles that are running lights and sirens to exceed posted speed limits, move against the traffic flow, and proceed through stop signs, red lights, and other control devices. And we understand that these exemptions to the motor vehicle law typically reference the concept of due regard, or simply stated, the concept of showing appropriate consideration for or sufficient attention to a particular situation. But there are a number of concerns with the concept of due regard, not the least of which is that it's subject to very broad legal interpretation. And because it depends on the actual facts, its application can vary widely from case to case. As an emergency vehicle driver, you need to keep in mind that the concept of due regard is the legal check and balance for permitting you exemptions to laws that others must abide by. Operation Safe Arrival believes that emergency service providers should accept the limitations of warning devices. They are great tools, but they certainly can't guarantee clear passage through intersections. Stay aware, stay defensive, do no harm, and arrive safely to answer the call. That's the kind of change that may well reduce the number of intersection crashes and save lives. In discussing the limitations of warning devices, we included situations that might keep other drivers from pulling over and giving way for emergency vehicles. If warning devices aren't seen or heard, for whatever reasons, they're just not going to be effective. It really doesn't matter if other drivers can't see or hear your warnings or simply choose to ignore them. The results are the same. Operation Safe Arrival is promoting safety, your own safety, and the public safety. And that includes recognizing that there are drivers out there who don't drive cautiously. Be on the lookout for them. Drive carefully and defensively, and do what you can to keep other drivers' mistakes from involving you in a collision. That's the kind of culture and change that'll save lives. There are two elements at the heart of emergency service personnel. One, we're committed to saving lives. And two, we often exercise that commitment with acts of heroism to protect our partners and the people of the communities we serve. The goal of Operation Safe Arrival is to save lives. What is needed is a new respect for the dangers posed by moving emergency vehicles through traffic, particularly through intersections. With that in mind, we've developed 8 simple guidelines that can reduce the number and severity of intersection crashes. We call the guidelines the 8 signs of intersection safety. You won't see them posted along the side of the road as you approach intersections, but you should know them and abide by them just the same. Here are the 8 signs of intersection safety. 1. Don't rely on warning devices to clear traffic. No warning device has yet been invented that actually stops traffic. Remember, the emergency vehicle driver cannot force the right-of-way, nor can they assume the right-of-way. The emergency driver does not have the right-of-way until the other vehicle yields to them. 2. Scan intersections for possible hazards. That includes right turn on red signals, pedestrians, and speeding vehicles, among others. 3. Begin to slow down well before reaching the intersection, and cover the brake pedal with your foot, and always scan in all 4 directions, left, right, front, and back. 4. Change the siren cadence not less than 200 feet from the intersection. 5. Scan the intersection for all possible passing options. That could mean passing on the right, passing on the left, or just waiting until the traffic clears. And always, always avoid using the opposing lane of traffic if at all possible. 6. Bring the vehicle to a complete stop for red traffic lights and stop signs when you are unable to account for all lanes of traffic. 7. Use your head by using your eyes. Establish eye contact with other vehicle drivers, and get your partner to help by communicating when all is clear and by reconfirming that all other vehicles have stopped. 8. Finally, always proceed at intersections 1 lane of traffic at a time. Approach each lane as a separate intersection. VFIS offers these 8 signs of intersection safety to implement, supplement, or enhance emergency vehicle response policies. And they fall under a few general headlines, like do no harm and take the time to be safe. A little extra time invested in arriving safely may well reduce the incidence of crashes. That will benefit you, your organizations, and the communities you serve. Intersection safety, doing no harm, and taking the time to be safe will help us do the job we're committed to do. We will save lives. Operation Safe Arrival is focused on change, changing our reliance on the effectiveness of warning devices, changing the way we respond to erratic or irrational actions of other drivers, and changing our practices to make every intersection crossing safer. But there's one thing that Operation Safe Arrival absolutely cannot change, and that's the laws of physics. When impact occurs, there will be damage. Consider this piece of apparatus, roughly 16 tons. That's an enormous amount of weight to manage safely. If you're trying to guide this behemoth at 25 miles an hour and suddenly face the necessity to stop quickly, the laws of physics will not bend. When you mix the inflexibility of physics with poor judgment by the driver, the consequences might well mean impact, injury, maybe death. Let's go through a couple of examples of very common and dangerous situations. Let's begin with not accounting for all lanes of traffic. We've created this artificial setting so that mistakes we dramatize can be limited to a virtual world. This will allow us to study each of the elements of the incident independently and in detail. That's not a luxury enjoyed in a real-world circumstance. This is a fairly typical intersection. Market Avenue runs east and west, High Street runs north and south. We'll begin this demonstration with a relatively lightweight emergency vehicle, say an ambulance, traveling west on Market Avenue in the center lane of traffic, a lane marked as a straight-through only. The lane to the left of the ambulance is a left turn lane, and the lane to the right is signed as a straight or right-hand turn lane. The road configuration on High Street is similar, at least in the northbound direction. Left lane for left turn only, center lane straight through, and right lane for straight through or right turn. There are tens of thousands of intersections like this all across the country. As the ambulance approaches, all traffic on Market Avenue, both eastbound and westbound, confronts a yellow signal briefly, which will of course predictably change to red. Responding to the ambulance's lights and sirens, the two vehicles ahead move aside to the right, while the vehicles in the left lane are waiting for their signal to turn. The ambulance driver can see that the line of northbound traffic begins to move forward. Then the lead car spots the ambulance and stops abruptly within the intersection. With that stop, the ambulance driver starts to move through the intersection as he scans High Street from the left to the right. From out of nowhere, he is struck, broadsided, from the second lane of the northbound traffic. There will be damage. There may be injuries, there may be death. How did this happen? This perspective holds the answer. Northbound lanes, left turn lane, straight only, and right turn and straight. The incident car is traveling in the curb lane when the light turns green. The traffic ahead starts to move and then begins to slow, and then stops without apparent reason. The incident car swings into the center lane and begins to accelerate. After all, the light is green. The driver has no perception that anything is wrong, and yet something is very wrong. There is an ambulance in the path, and another intersection crash will take its toll. But it was all avoidable. If only the ambulance driver had obeyed just 3 of the 8 signs of intersection safety. If only the ambulance driver had scanned for possible hazards, had approached each lane as a separate intersection, and had made eye contact. This incident could have been avoided, and the passing through the intersection could have occurred like this instead. If only the ambulance driver had followed the signs of intersection safety, the ambulance could have arrived safely to render the service for which it is committed. Let's move to a second scenario, and we'll have this incident involve a pumper and demonstrate both the limitations of warning devices and how important it is to account for all lanes of traffic. This is the same virtual intersection, but this time our emergency vehicle is traveling in the center lane, northbound on High Street. Left lane is left turn only, center lane is straight only, and the curb lane is a straight and right turn lane. As the scenario begins, all the traffic in both directions on Market Avenue has a green light. There are vehicles on High Street in both left turn and center lanes waiting for the light to change. And a vehicle in the curb lane is intending to make a right-hand turn on red. As the pumper approaches the intersection, the pumper driver moves toward the curbside lane. The car ahead turns onto Market Avenue to clear the way for the pumper who is intending to proceed straight through the intersection. As he gets nearer, the driver of the pumper slows down and can see that all the visible traffic on Market Avenue has come to a stop. The traffic that he can see has perceived his presence and has yielded, and so he continues through at a reduced rate of speed despite the fact that he cannot account for the traffic on the far side of the tractor-trailer. That becomes the fateful decision, and the outcome is critical. Impact, crash, injury, perhaps death, and the individuals in need of the pumper's service, the individuals who placed the call for help initially, go wanting. Instead of rendering service, the pumper is in need of service, and everyone involved will suffer the consequences. Viewing the incident from the perspective of the privately owned vehicle makes it clear that there was no warning of the impact. If only the pumper driver had obeyed just 2 of the 8 signs of intersection safety. If only the pumper driver hadn't relied on warning devices and had approached each lane as a separate intersection, this incident could have been avoided, and the passing through the intersection could have occurred like this. We open this section of the program with a reference to the laws of physics and how they cannot be changed. We'd like to return to our virtual setting one final time to take a look at both force and inertia. Let's presume that we're driving a pumper west on Market Avenue at a relatively modest 25 miles per hour. That means that we're traveling 37.5 feet every second. In the blink of an eye, our pumper will move 37.5 feet down the road. This becomes particularly significant if there's a need to stop suddenly, perhaps for a vehicle that's about to pass through the intersection. Given the weight and force of the pumper, it will take more than 5 seconds, more than 90 feet to bring the pumper to a safe, complete, and controlled stop. Think of it this way. Traveling at 25 miles per hour, your front bumper effectively extends 90 feet in front of your actual vehicle. If you need to stop in the intersection, you'd better begin applying the brakes more than 90 feet before you get there.
As we're approaching an intersection, we can see what color that light is. And if the light has been green for a period of time as you're approaching it, you have to anticipate that that light is going to change color before you get there. So there's no excuse for having to stop on a dime, as the saying goes, or to speed up when it's a yellow light to beat the red light. We should be more aware and have that vehicle slowed to a speed that we can stop well before we get to the intersection.
We've covered a lot of material in this program, and yet the message is very simple. Intersections pose a very serious threat to you, to your organizations, and to the people of the community you serve. You're committed to providing service. At the very least, do no harm.
I tell people all the time the service we provide is a monopoly. People don't get choices on what engine or what ladder they ask to come to their emergency incident. We're it. So the opportunity for us to make sure that we first and foremost are able to arrive on the scene to provide that service has to be paramount in how we operate our vehicles. We need to arrive as soon as we can, but also as safely as we can.
Driving through intersections without giving due regard, letting the the protection of the citizens that are there, and that intersection is also the responsibility of that driver and that officer. And the people who train them, is to make sure that they know that when they go through an intersection, that you're now responsible.
If we try to push that envelope, what we're asking for is to create a set of circumstances outside of the safety envelope that may cause us never to arrive at all.
In looking back at it now, had the fire truck stopped and proceeded very slowly through the intersection, they very well may have been able to see the tractor trailer approaching the intersection and stopped, and the accident been avoided altogether. One of the biggest things that we learned is this situation does not have to happen.
It does not have to happen.
It does not have to happen.